All right, so final video. I hope this would be the last for questions number 3, 4, and 5 of lesson 20. So in the first video, we took the gross profit, operating profit, gross margin, operating margin. Then we created this table. On the second video, we filled out all the information for the historical data. So for this third video, we will now work on the assumptions and the forecasted data. So the first thing is make sure that you have we created this in the first video, data validation for the strong case, base case, and weak case. Now let me just select this to strong case so I can see as I work on the formula, which could be really complex. Now, we will first work on the assumptions. What we want to do here is whenever we select something here, we want this table to return the data that match strong case, base case, and weak case. So for example, I am on revenue growth. We want Excel to give us this data for year 4, which is 16% if we select strong case. And if we change it to base case, let's say for example, we want it to give us year 4, base case 15.5. So we want this data to go here depending on which scenario we will be selecting. So the formula that we will use is called the one that is called offset. Now, for the offset, we will first need to um, select the starting point where the data is will be taken. So for this one, it's the age 35. So if you are familiar with the VLOOKUP, you will have to select all the data. I think this is much easier because with the offset, you will just need to select the starting point. So for this one, this will be the starting point. That means that it will take whatever data it has below that, depending on the set of the next syntax that you will be putting in your formula. So I will just add a dollar sign here so that it will not move when I drag it later on. So we want Excel to get the data from this column when the following condition match. So first is if the D31, which is our scenario, I will just add a dollar sign as well so that it will not change, match any of these strong case, base case, weak case, and we want it to stay in the same row, close parentheses, and the same column, close parentheses. So it's also my first time using this formula, so I'm kind of I don't memorize it by heart, but just a recap for the formula, we will be using offset, and then offset we will get the data from the column H35. This is our H35 because offset uses the starting point. It means that it will use any data below that. So this is the starting point, and the data it will be looking for is this column. And then when these conditions match, first, if D31, our scenario, matches the C36 to C38, which is this one, and it wanted to stay in the same row, so it will get us the data that is on the same row, and it wanted to stay on the same column. We'll just put a dollar sign here as well because we don't want it to move right there. And I'll click enter. So that's 16%. Let me just enter this. 16%, and see if I do that. Base case, it changes to 15.5. And then weak case, it changes to 14%. Okay, so here, what I will do, for the year 5, I will use the same formula. But the only thing that we will change, remember with the first formula, we want it to stay in the same row where the lookup data is located, and then the same column where we put the offset. But for this one, we wanted to jump to one column to the right. So that's a positive sign. So we will use 1 here in the end. So that's the only thing that we will change. And then click enter. And it gets 17% base case, weak case right there. All right. So we will do the same for the gross margin. So let's do the formula again just to practice. So offset starting point column H40 because we want this data and we want to add a dollar sign so it doesn't change. And then if this condition match, if the scenario, which is this one, and then we put the dollar sign so it doesn't change, matches any of these data, and then let's put another dollar sign there so it won't move. And then we wanted to give us the same the data that is on the same row of this, so we put 0, and then same data at the same column of this, which is our starting point H40, so this one, so we put 0 as well, and then click enter. All right, so there. Now for this one, we will be using the same formula. That's for year 4. But for year 5, this is the data for year 5. So we wanted to jump into one column to the right. So that means a positive number or positive 1. So we will just change the last value into 1 there. Okay. So next is we are going to work on the operating margin, which is this data. We will be using the same formula, but let me just start over for the formula, so just to practice. So we will do offset on this column, which is our starting point, age 45, because we will want this data here. And I will put a dollar sign. And then if the following condition match our scenario, D31, dollar sign, so it won't move, match any of these data, dollar sign again, sorry, put that comma. And then we wanted to give us the same data that is on the same row. So for strong case 0.17, we don't want it to jump. So we put 0 and then close the parentheses and also the same column. So any data below that, our starting point. So 0 right there. And then we want the same formula to our year 5, except that we wanted to move or jump into one column, which is this one. So we will put 1. If you could still remember the axis, that's kind of the same concept. And I'll click enter. So let's just double check. I'll go to base case. We have 15, 92, 15.5, 15.5. All right, so last step. We are now ready to get all the data that we need to answer the questions. Let me just put this into blue. Now we will need the revenue. We color this yellow. And then the gross profit. And finally, the operating income, or EBIT. Now, for the revenue, we will need to take consideration the assumption for the growth in our total revenue. So what we're gonna do here is we will use the formula, the previous year's total revenue multiplied by 1, and then add the forecasted growth, which is 15.5% there. So close the parentheses. So just to recap before I click enter, for the forecasted revenue for year 4, what we did here is the total revenue of the previous year, which is year 3, multiplied by 1 because we are increasing, plus the percentage of the growth. So it's like the percentage of the growth plus the percentage of the growth of the previous year's total revenue plus the total revenue of the previous year. So that's how this formula is interpreted. And then we will click enter. I don't want the autofill. So we have that data. Let me just, and then make this blue. They want it in blue. All right. Next is the year 5. So for the year 5, it's the same formula, but for this time, it's for year 4 because it's for the previous year's total revenue. So the formula is the previous year's forecasted revenue multiplied by 1 because it's an increase, plus the percentage of the previous year's, or the percentage of the growth of the previous year's forecasted total revenue. So that's 15.5%. And click enter. So just to recap, the formula is the previous year's total revenue, forecasted total revenue, multiplied by 1 plus the percentage of the revenue growth, and click enter. So we have this data. Next is we have the gross profit. So the gross profit, we have this gross margin, meaning this is going to be the increase, or it's going to be the value of the gross profit. What we will need here is just to multiply the revenue, forecasted revenue, by the forecasted gross margin. So that's it means that that's how our total, or our gross profit, will increase. So that's 11.5 to 11,520,709,200, and we will do the same for year 5. So again, the formula is the revenue multiplied by the forecasted gross margin. Forecasted revenue for year 5 multiplied by the forecasted gross margin for year 5, right there. And then finally, we do the operating income, or EBIT. So for this one, the formula is the revenue multiplied, forecasted revenue multiplied by the forecasted operating margin, right there. So let's do the same thing for year 5. The formula is the forecasted revenue multiplied by the forecasted operating margin. Let's just make this to blue. Okay, so this is the answers. You can now answer the questions for questions number 3, 4, and 5. And let's just double check before I end this. If I select strong case, then if I select base case, then if I select weak case, right there. Okay,